We've been talking in the podcast about entrepreneurs and the habits that they have and that they create around themselves by wanting to be bigger, better, strive further. Is there vulnerability with that when they get to the highest of highs, they're ultimately going to crash down? And how can they self-protect?
Yeah, it's pretty predictable. And it's fascinating that human beings are surprised by their own humanness. People are working late nights, early mornings. Every single time you are at your peak, if you are hyped up and you are at that kind of dopamine high, you know that there is going to be an equally as deep fall. And it's at that high and at that low that individuals are most vulnerable. And for entrepreneurs, that's all day, every day, because they're riding these highs and lows. I would say that that's an early entrepreneur or an entrepreneur who is not aware of this yet. It doesn't have to be that way. How can an entrepreneur mitigate these highs and lows? And that's actually through practice. It's through practice a few ways. Well, number one, I would say awareness, knowing that you actually have to talk yourself out of getting super pumped up, because an entrepreneur's, idea is, let's go. And they're very amped up. When you begin to hone that in and taper that back and put the reins on that, it allows for a level of neutrality. For example, I'll give you an example. I did this whole huge book launch, right? I spent 2 years writing this book. Do you think the day before I was super amped up? No way. No way. Do you think that I had to talk myself out of the weeks leading up to that book launch, which, by the way, was a New York Times bestseller twice? Within the first month, it hit the list twice. I had to pull myself back because I knew that if I allowed myself to get too high, that I was going to spend a month depressed. It's just biochemistry. So instead, I had a cadence to it. I would say, okay, this is so cool. And then I would move on to the next thing. All right, this is cool. I'm going to do this thing. It's cool. I'm going to go do Good Morning America. It's cool. That's fine. But it wasn't as if each thing was the biggest thing.
Can you only learn that? Can you learn that through experience? Is that just experience that teaches you that? Do you think that kind of, no, it's not?
No, you have to practice that. Look at some entrepreneurs will be doing that I remember this one of my patients, he does this huge event that he throws in Las Vegas, massive, thousands of people. He's been doing it for years. Every time after the event, he's depressed for a month. And you would think after the first 5 years of doing it, he would come up with a different solution. So I would say it's practice. And here's how you practice it outside of the big event. You practice not celebrating every win. And people are going to be like, oh, that's so negative. No, you're practicing it for an outcome that you're looking for. Typically, and I'm not saying belittle yourself. There are some people that nothing is ever good enough, and so they're never celebrating anything. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying you do a great big interview, you have a paper published, you had a great sale. You don't need to celebrate every single one of them. There can be a cadence to how much you are celebrating. You can decide, you can flip a coin and decide whether you're going to celebrate or not. People can go get Starbucks or whatever that they want, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So what are ways that you can layer in dopamine preservation is flip a coin. Heads, you get Starbucks. Tails, you have to walk away. Could be literally in the coffee shop and it'll sting a little bit, but you begin to build up this cadence where, it's not such a big deal. I know it sounds crazy, but it absolutely works. Another way, again, what we're really talking about is dopamine preservation. That's kind of the drive and motivation neurotransmitter. It does a whole bunch of other things. It does affect the body systemically, but it allows us to be able to verbalize something and put a vocabulary to it, which is why, I'm mentioning dopamine, but again, it's a whole host of other neurotransmitters. The other thing that you can recognize is that there are certain substances that increase this dopamine release, whether it's caffeine or stimulants or chocolate or sex or exercise, understanding that the things that release dopamine quickly, like stimulants, maybe a pre-workout, then you want to not use that every day. Flip a coin, and it's going to suck, right? Maybe you're not going to have coffee every day, or you're not going to have any kind of stimulant before you work out. You will become accustomed to having this intermittent reward.
Kind of makes me respect my husband a lot more, who's a sportsman, who always says, don't get overexcited by the winning, which now I completely understand what he means. And that is very, very popular in sport, to apply that thinking, is that you take the highs and the lows with exactly the same approach, and you don't get overexcited by the highs and you don't get too depressed about the lows, and you take everything on a sort of an equilibrium. So now I understand him, finally, after 10 years.
He's probably been very successful. He's probably been a very successful athlete.
Yeah. Well, now I know why. It's good. Thank you. It took you, Gabrielle, to make me realize.
But it's translatable. It's a translatable skill. It's a very translatable skill. And why do I care about it as a physician? I don't care about sport performance. I care about it because at the peaks of vulnerability, if your husband or an athlete or an entrepreneur gets really high and gets really low, I got to get them out of that hole.
Yeah.
That hole will derail an entire year of being healthy faster than anything. Yeah,
it's absolutely true. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. I know you're very busy. Congratulations with the book. It's obviously going brilliantly well. And best of luck for the rest of the year and for Christmas.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.